Hey guys, my name is JC and today we're going to be playing Memnarch. The goal of this deck is to ramp hard, cast our commander, and then steal enough of our opponent's permanents to both deny them of resources and use those resources against them. If you'd like to see how this deck was built, make sure to stop by the channel where we have a deck tech as well as other gameplay videos showing how the deck was built as well as how it plays out. In addition, we also have a Discord group with a channel dedicated specifically to Memnarch, so if you'd like to discuss the deck further, make sure to check out the link in the description below. Let's see if our opponents have what it takes to stop one of the original villains of Magic. Alright guys, let's see who we're going to try to steal off today. We have Brion Stoutarm, we have Bruna, Light of Alabaster, and to round it out we have Phenax, God of Deception. Alright, if we take a look at this opening hand, it's okay, but there's quite a few lands here, and I really think we need at least 2 pieces of ramp. This deck likes to ramp hard, and it's our first mulligan, so I think we can do better. So let's mulligan and see what we get. Okay, this second hand is a little better. I mean, we do have to wait until turn 3 to be able to actually cast our Worn Power Stone, but we can hold up some counter magic, and I do love Consecrated Sphinx. It can definitely refill our hand, especially if our opponents decide to interact with us pretty hard, so I think we can keep this. Brion starts us off by playing a tap land for turn, and that's going to be it for them. Bruna plays a tap land themselves, and that's also going to be it for them. Phenax plays a land, and now they cast a Ruin Crab. It has landfall. Whenever a land ETB is under your control, each opponent mills 3 cards. Probably one of the best turn 1 plays that deck could hope for, so they're definitely off to a good start. But then they pass the turn to us, and we draw a Swiftfoot Boots. So our turn 1's going to be pretty simple. We're just going to play our island, and then we're going to pass it over. Brion plays a land, and then they cast an Armillary Sphere. 2 tap and sack it, search your library for up to 2 basic land cards, reveal them, put them into your hand, and then shuffle. But that is going to be it for them. Bruna plays a land, and then they cast Faithful Mending. You gain 2 life, draw 2 cards, and discard 2 cards, and it also has flashback for 3 mana. And it looks like they bin an Alexi's Cloak, as well as an Angelic Destiny. But then they pass the turn. Phenax plays a shock land for turn, but they have it come into play tapped, and that does trigger their Ruin Crab. So each opponent will mill 3 cards. That's actually going to work really great with our Academy Ruins. Gives us a little more access to cards, and looks like we mill a Pull from Tomorrow, Arcane Signet, and Gilded Lotus. We also have to pay attention to the Bruna's graveyard, because that is important for them as well, but they only mill a land and open the armory in an island, so nothing to worry about there. And that's going to be it for the Phenax player. We draw a Palladium Mirror. Okay, well, we'll start by playing our Academy Ruins. And I don't think we need to hold up our Arcane Denial just yet, so I think we'll get down our Swiftfoot Boots. But that is going to be it for us. Brion plays a land, and then they cast a Ghostly Prison. Creatures can't attack you unless their controller pays 2 for each creature they control that's attacking you. Well, not a problem for us because our deck doesn't really plan to attack, we just plan to take. But that might be a slight problem for the Bruna player. And maybe indirectly that's a problem for us because they certainly won't be attacking Brion, at least early on. But that is going to be it for their turn. Bruna plays a land, and now they cast a Frantic Surge. Draw 2 cards, then discard 2 cards, untap up to 3 lands. And with that, we actually have the Brion player scooping. It looks like they just got a Curiosity as well as a Mirror Mad Phantasm. And then they cast a Trinket Mage. When it ETBs, you may search your library for an artifact card with mana value 1 or less, reveal that card, put it into your hand, and then shuffle. They find themselves a Sol Ring, and then they pass the turn. Phenax plays a land, which triggers their Ruin Crab. We mill an Ottawa, an Island, and a Training Grounds. But it looks like the Phenax player is just passing the turn, holding open 3 mana. So they might be holding it for the Bruna player, seeing as they chewed up a Sol Ring. We also draw a Liquid Metal Torque. Okay, well, we'll play our land for turn. And I think if the Bruna player is going to get down to Sol Ring and essentially go a little bit quicker than what we'd like, we have to keep up with the ramp, so we'll cast our Worn Power Stone and just hope that the Phenax player doesn't counter that. I don't think they will, because like I said, I do think they're going to be a little more worried about the Bruna player, but you never really know. Memnarch does put the fear in a lot of players. That does go through, and that is going to be it for us. Bruna plays a tap land for turn. Next, they cast an Esper Sentinel. Whenever an opponent casts their first non-creature spell each turn, draw a card unless that player pays X, where X is Esper Sentinel's power. Looks like we have a response from the Phenax player though, and they cast a Meeting of Minds. It has Convoke and draw 2 cards. So it's going to be a very interesting game, this one, having 3 heavy blue decks at the table. Be interesting to see how much interaction our opponents actually run. That's why I think it's going to be really important for us to get our card advantage sources down on the board and starting us to draw cards. We're either going to try to get down our Consecrated Sphinx or hopefully Padeem with some protection with the Swiftfoot Boots. Because in a control matchup, card advantage really is key in typically which player comes out on top. Esper Sentinel resolves. Next, they cast a Sol Ring. Now they move to combat, but they decide not to attack. And that is going to be it for their turn. Phenax plays a land for turn, which triggers their Ruin Crab. Let's see what we mill this time. A Star Compass, an Ornithopter of Paradise, and an Ugin. The Ugin would have been really nice. Cut Your Losses, Plains, and a Burnished Heart for the Bruna player. But next, Phenax cast a Talisman of Dominance that does trigger the Esper Sentinel. Let's see if they pay. And they do. And they finish up by casting a Hunted Horror. It's a 7/7 with Trample, and when it ETBs, target opponent creates 2 3/3 green Centaur creature tokens with protection from black. Okay. Nice little big stompy creature for a very low mana cost. Do they give us the Centaurs though? I'm not really too sure here, to be honest. If they're really worried about us, they may want the Bruna's help to take us out. So therefore they would actually give them the Centaur tokens. But then again, the Bruna player is certainly filling up their graveyard here, so they may also be worried about that. I guess we're going to find out. And they do give us the Centaurs, thankfully. We're happy to take them. And that is going to be it for their turn. And we do draw a land for turn. Well, we will start by playing that. Now, we do have an interesting choice on our hand. We can certainly tap out, play the Consecrated Sphinx, and risk possibly it getting countered from the Bruna player because they do have open mana. Certainly enough for a hard counterspell. Not too worried about the Phenax player. I mean, they certainly could have something like a Force of Will, but I don't always rely too much on that being a fact. If we don't do that, we can cast Padim and also equip it with the Swiftfoot Boots, so we get slow but consistent card draw, and it is protected, especially when Memnarch does come down. That does give us really good protection there. Look, I think I'm actually going to risk it. I'm going to try for our Consecrated Sphinx and see how we go. It looks like we do have a response from the Bruna player. No, we don't. And it looks like that one's resolving. So hopefully good news for us, unless of course they do have a removal spell like a Swords to Plowshares or something. Guess we're going to have to wait and see. Now we will move to combat. And I definitely jinxed myself there, so before we move to combat, they cast a Path to Exile targeting our Consecrated Sphinx. Well, we can't do anything about that. Exile target creature, its controller may search their library for a basic land card, put that card onto the battlefield, tap, then shuffle. Well, I guess at least we do get a consolation prize with that. Put an island into play tapped. Now we'll move to combat. I'm not too sure if the Phenax player is going to swing at us now. I don't think it's going to hurt us too much if they do the next turn, so we'll try to show some good faith and we'll send both of the Centaurs towards the Bruna player. They block one of the Centaurs with their Trinket Mage, so that puts them down to 39, and then we're just going to pass the turn. Bruna starts by sacrificing their Floodplain. Next they flash back their Faithful Mending, so at least we don't see their commander come down this turn, which is good news. It buys us a little more time. And they do bin 2 pretty important cards there, Ethereal Armor as well as Eldrazi Conscription. They also play a land for turn. Now they move to combat, but they decide not to attack, and that is going to be it for their turn. Phenax just moves straight to combat. The Horror does swing towards the Bruna player, thankfully. So our previous attack definitely paid off. I think that Eldrazi Conscription definitely put a target on their back. They just take the damage. That puts them down to 34. Next, Phenax casts an Undead Alchemist. If a zombie you control will deal combat damage to a player, instead that player mills that many cards. And whenever a creature is put into an opponent's graveyard from their library, exile that card and create a 2/2 black zombie creature token. And they also play a land for turn, a Blast Zone. That triggers their Ruin Crab. We mill a land, an Unwinding Clock, and a Bribery. But that is going to be it for them. We draw a land for turn. So let's play that. I don't think I actually want to resolve the Memnarch now. It's going to hurt us a little too much if they do actually counter it or remove it before we can actually equip the Swiftfoot Boots. So I think we'll go a little slower here. We'll start by casting our Liquid Metal Torque. We'll pay for the Esper Sentinel. Next we'll cast Padim. That goes through. And now we'll actually think we'll sit back on our Arcane Denial. I think we do need to hold that up for the Bruna player, because they're going to potentially be able to one-shot a player or at least hurt them pretty badly, and that player might be us. So we are going to move to combat. We're going to swing in towards the Bruna player once again. While the Phenax player is working with us, we're going to try to milk that as long as we can. Because if we can get this game to a 1v1, I feel like we're going to be in a pretty strong position, especially if Padim sticks around and starts drawing us cards. The damage goes through, that knocks them down to 28, and we're just going to pass the turn. Bruna plays a land. Now they attempt to cast their commander, Bruna Light of Alabaster. Flying Vigilance, when it attacks or blocks, you may attach to it any number of auras on the battlefield, and you may put onto the battlefield attached to it any number of aura cards that could enchant it from your graveyard and or hand. Alright, let's see if the Phenax player has anything to say about it. It looks like they don't. Well, we're definitely going to try to counter this. Though the Bruna player definitely does have open mana, and they are going to get a draw off us from Esper Sentinel, so they may have an answer to stop us. Let's hope not. But it looks like they have no response, so luckily we do counter that. But that is going to be it for them. On Phenax's upkeep, our Arcane Denial triggers. So Bruna's going to draw 2 cards and we'll draw 1. We get ourselves a Vidalcan Engineer. Phenax starts by playing a land that triggers their Ruin Crab. It looks like we just mill 3 lands, and the Bruna player gets a Curator's Ward in the bin. Next they cast their commander, Phenax God of Deception. It has indestructible as long as your devotion to blue and black is less than 7, it isn't a creature, and creatures you control have tapped. Target player mills X cards, where X is this creature's toughness. Now they move to combat, but they decide not to attack, and that is going to be it for their turn. On our upkeep, Redeem triggers, so we get to draw a card because we do have the highest mana value artifact on the battlefield. We get ourselves a Silvermere and then a Phyrexian Metamorph. Alright, well both of our opponents do have open mana and quite a few cards in hand, but I don't think we can delay this any longer. So let's try and cast our commander and see how we go. At the absolute worst, we will have enough mana to be able to recast it again next turn, but sometimes you just got to play into the counter magic. So let's see if we can get our commander onto the battlefield. And that does go straight through. So now we'll move to combat. We'll send our centaurs towards the Bruna player once again. The damage goes through, putting them down to 22. And that is going to be it for our turn. Bruna plays a land, a Reliquary Tower, so now they have no maximum hand size. Then they cast a Windfall. Each player discards their hand and draws cards equal to the greatest number of cards a player discarded this way. In response, the Phenax player uses their Undead Alchemist as well as their Hunted Horror to actually mill the Bruna player. Then they also use their Ruin Crab as well. So a little dangerous considering the Bruna player does want to actually fill up their graveyard, but Phenax might be thinking they can actually just completely mill them out here. But then they also cast a Triton Tactics. Up to 2 target creatures each get +0/+3 until end of turn. Untap those creatures at this turn's next end of combat. Tap each creature that was blocked by one of those creatures this turn, and it doesn't untap during its controller's next untap step. That did trigger Esper Sentinel, but it looks like we also have a response from the Bruna player potentially. They are floating 3 mana. Now it looks like Bruna untaps, so it seems they don't want to respond here. Phenax doesn't actually pay the Esper Sentinel cost, so they might have some form of interaction in their hand with 1 mana. Just something to keep in mind. The Triton Tactics does resolve, so the Ruin Crab as well as the Hunted Horror does get some pretty high toughness there. Now they are tapping down the Hunted Horror, and we're going to see the Ruin Crab be tapped as well, I'm guessing. And it looks like they are targeting the Bruna player with that, so definitely trying to take them out here. Like I said, if that can happen, that's really good news for us because I feel like we can actually take the Phenax player, especially by being able to steal their commander with our Memnarch. When creatures are hit in the graveyard, that's also triggering the Undead Alchemist, so they will be making a 2/2 zombie every time that happens. So currently they've just made 2. When they mill again, it looks like they also get another Undead Alchemist trigger. So Bruna's down to 24 cards left in library, and finally the Windfall does resolve. Looks like we get a Negate, which is actually really good with our 2 open mana, a Copy Artifact, a Coalition Relic, and 2 islands. Now Bruna casts a Deep Analysis with Flashback. Target player draws 2 cards. After that, they cast a Talisman of Progress. At the end of combat, Triton Tactics did trigger. And that is going to be it for the Bruna player. Phenax starts by playing a land for turn, a Detection Tower. So we're going to mill some more cards again. Notably, that land does allow them to actually get around Hexproof. So unfortunately, Redeem won't work as well as we hope for here. If they want to target Memnarch, they are going to be able to. We mill a land, a draw spell as well as Metalworker. That will trigger Undead Alchemist, so they get to make a zombie. Next, they cast a Hoarding Broodlord. It has Convoke, Flying. When at ETB, search your library for a card, exile it face down, then shuffle. For as long as that card remains exiled, you may play it, and spells you cast from exile have Convoke. Alright, well they can pretty much search up their library for any card they need right now. Plans may be getting thwarted here. Next, they cast an Intruder Alarm, which also triggers Esper Sentinel. Well, we'll see if they pay for that first. And it looks like they don't pay. It says creatures don't untap during their controller's untap steps, and whenever a creature ETBs, untap all creatures. Well, that's definitely a card we don't want them having because they can potentially mill both of us out now. So we're going to try to respond here with our Negate. Let's just hope they don't have the counter magic to back it up, though in saying that they might have tutored with the Hoarding Broodlord for some protection. Now that also triggers Esper Sentinel casting the Negate, which we won't pay for. Thankfully the Negate does go through. We might have just saved ourselves there from losing the game. Now all we have to hope is that they don't have an answer for Memnarch, and I think we can actually shut down the Phenax player, or at least slow them down significantly. Next they cast a Bruvac, the Grandiloquent. If an opponent would mill 1 or more cards, they mill twice that many cards instead. Very scary card to see in a mill deck. It looks like Bruna has a response here. And they actually cast a Teferi's Protection. Until your next turn, your life total can't change and you gain protection from everything. All permanents you control phase out and exile Teferi's Protection. Really great answer and response there. I think we're actually going to put a stop on our upkeep trigger, just in case we actually want to use our Academy Ruins. We'll have a little bit of a think about it. Now they move to combat, but they decide not to attack. Wasn't really expecting them to either. And that is going to be it for their turn. Alright, so let's have a quick look through our graveyard. Don't want Palladium Mere, Silvermere, Phyrexian Metamorph. I mean, we could use that to get the Hoarding Broodlord. So that might be a possible option that we want to do. Unwinding Clock's not great at the moment. We don't want Ornithopter, Star Compass, Guild Lotus, or Arcane. Yeah, that's a tough decision there. be able to tutor up for whatever we want in the deck might actually be something we want to do. I mean, we certainly want to steal Phenax. There's no doubt about that. I think we'll actually do it. So let's in response use our Academy Ruins. Put Phyrexian Metamorph back on top of our deck. The Phenax player didn't respond there to mill us, so that was good news. So now we can draw a card thanks to Padim, which we know what it is. Unless, of course, they respond now. And it looks like they do respond now, so they tap Phenax itself to mill us. So we also get Liquid Metal Coating, Mycosynth Gardens, Mirror Cold Steel Heart, Clock of Omens is a really good one. We do lose a creature there that triggers Undead Alchemist, so they'll make another zombie. And we do lose the Phyrexian Metamorph there. We draw a Sky Diamond. And then in our draw step, we get ourselves a Celestus. Alright, well let's start by playing our island. Then we're going to turn Phenax into an artifact. And let's try to gain control of Phenax. And luckily that does go through. And after that we'll just cast a Sky Diamond. And I think we're just going to pass the turn from there. Bruna starts by playing a land. Next they recast their commander, which does go through straight away. Now do they have haste? Which they may very well have, seen as they put their commander down knowing we have Memnarch out. But instead they cast a Tribute Mage. When it ETBs, you may search your library for an artifact card with mana value 2, reveal that card, put it into your hand, then shuffle. So there's probably going to find a Lightning Greaves as a best guess. But for some reason it didn't actually reveal the card they tutored for. And that is going to be it for their turn. Now Phenax starts by playing a land for turn, that triggers their Ruin Crab. Looks like we mill a Sculpting Steel, Mind Stone, Cavern of Souls is a good one, Agent of Treachery as well. That does trigger Undead Alchemist. So we lose our Agent. They also make another zombie. Next they cast a Midnight Clock, which triggers the Esper Sentinel. Tap Tad Blue, you can pay 3 mana, put an hour counter on it. At the beginning of each upkeep, you can put an hour counter on Midnight Clock. And when the 12th hour counter is put on Midnight Clock, shuffle your hand and graveyard into your library, then draw 7 cards, exile Midnight Clock. They don't pay for the Esper Sentinel trigger, so Bruna draws a card. And next they cast an overloaded Cyclonic Rift, something we're not really happy to see at all. Unfortunately, we don't have an answer to that. Hopefully Bruna does. But they don't, so we get all of our stuff bounced back to our hand. And I think we're probably going to see all of those creatures come our way. Yep, looks like all the zombies are coming our way. Looks like the Hunted Horror is still going towards Bruna. The Hoarding Broodlord is also going over towards Bruna's way, as well as the Bruvac as well. We take the damage, mill in a lot of cards, and that also triggers Undead Alchemist 3 times. And that is going to be it for their turn. On our upkeep, Midnight Clock triggers. And we draw a 1 with the machine. Was really hoping it was actually our own Cyclonic Rift there, because it currently isn't in the graveyard at the moment. So we'll play an island. Next we'll play our Liquid Metal Torque. Then we'll use our Liquid Metal Torque to actually make the Hoarding Broodlord an artifact. We'll follow that up with a copy artifact. We'll have it come in as a copy of the Hoarding Broodlord. Alright, well that's what's left in our library at the moment. Unfortunately not a lot. I mean, I don't think we can really do too much here unfortunately. We're just going to be dead on the crackback anyway. But we'll take the Cyclonic Rift. Next we'll play our Coalition Relic. Then we'll finish up by playing our Sky Diamond. And that is going to be it for our turn. On Bruna's upkeep, Midnight Clock triggers. Bruna starts by casting a Sol Ring. Next they cast a Grand Arbiter Augustine. White spells you cast cost 1 less to cast. Blue spells also cost 1 less to cast. And spells your opponents cast cost 1 more to cast. After that they recast Bruna. And it looks like that's it for their turn. So I was half expecting they were maybe going to play a Lightning Greaves there. But it looks like they didn't have it. Now on Phenax's upkeep, Midnight Clock triggers. So that'll put it on 3 hour counters now. Now they move to combat. Looks like the Hunted Horror is going towards Bruna. So is the Hoarding Broodlord. And also the Undead Alchemist. And then it looks like we're receiving all the zombies. Which we're actually pretty happy to see. That means no direct damage is actually going through to us. So we're only going to mill the cards here. We will block one of the zombies with our Hoarding Broodlord. It looks like Bruna actually blocks the Undead Alchemist. And that does also trigger Bruna. They're going to be able to whack all of the auras back onto Bruna itself. So now with all of those auras attached, Bruna is currently a 92/92, has protection from creatures from all colors. It can block any number of creatures, which is actually quite relevant. Annihilator 2, Double Strike, First Strike, Hexproof, Indestructible, Lifelink, Trample, and can't be blocked. That is a lot of keyword abilities and a lot of power and toughness on one creature, that's for sure. They also have the Faith Unbroken trigger as well. When it ETBs, exile target creature an opponent controls until Faith Unbroken leaves the battlefield. Be interesting to see which creature they actually target with that. So that might have been something that the Phenax player didn't expect. And it looks like they actually exile the Ruin Crab there. So good, we get to keep our blocker. So luckily for us, we don't actually mill the rest of our cards in our graveyard, meaning we don't have to use our Academy Ruins trick to keep us into the game. Let's see what else Phenax has for us. They just recast their commander. But it looks like Bruna has a response, and they actually cast a Swan Song. Counter-target enchantment, instant or sorcery spell, its controller creates a 2/2 bluebird creature token with flying. Okay, they definitely want to try to avoid being milled out here. And then Phenax casts a Spell Skite. You can pay a Phyrexian blue, change a target of target spell or ability to Spell Skite. And that is going to be it for their turn. So this game's definitely got interesting. It's certainly not over yet. I mean, we are coming to the back end of it for sure, but definitely felt like the Phenax player was going to take it. On our upkeep, Midnight Clock does trigger. I think in response, we're actually going to use our Academy Ruin. We're going to put our Doubling Cube on top of our deck. Then the clock does resolve. We draw the Doubling Cube for turn. And we are just going to pass the turn from here. On Bruna's upkeep, Midnight Clock triggers. They play a land for turn, which ETB's tapped, but they do gain a life. Next, they cast a Talisman of Progress. Now they move to combat. Bruna swings towards the Phenax player, thankfully. Doesn't force us to make a tough decision there. Annihilated 2 does trigger, but Phenax definitely has the bodies to be able to sacrifice. Yep, and it looks like they're sacrificing 2 zombies. Bruna's ability triggers, but they've already got all of the auras they could want on their commander. It looks like damage is going through. And that is the Phenax player out of the game. Alright, well let's try to see if we can actually resolve our Cyclonic Rift here. And luckily that does go through. I was really unsure if that was actually going to work or not. That also triggers their Curator's Ward though, so they do get to draw 2 cards. But they only have 2 cards left in their library. So it looks like Cyclonic Rift has definitely made this game, that's for sure, as it typically does. Very powerful card, and we're definitely seeing why here. And now we move to our turn. Okay, so I'm going to start by using our Academy Ruins. I'm going to put a Caged Sun on top of our deck. But it looks like in response, Bruna cast the Swords to Plowshares on our Hoarding Broodlord. Not a worry at all, we'll gain 7 life from that. We'll draw that card for turn. Next we'll play out our Caged Sun. We'll choose blue as the color. And then we'll finish up by casting our Doubling Cube. And now we'll pass it over to our opponent. Okay, so now our opponent goes to draw from an empty library. And that is the game done there, guys. Alright, let's go to the review and discuss what happened.
So overall, that was a really enjoyable game. An interesting dynamic developed fairly early where we had to keep our eye on the Bruna player at all times because the Phenax player filling their graveyard actually enhanced their game plan and potentially allowed them to take one player out of the game at any time. Now let me tell you, after playing Memnarch against many opponents, if there is a chance that a player gets taken out early, it's usually the Memnarch player. But because we were focusing so much on the Bruna player and spending our resources trying to slow them down, it basically let the Phenax player continue with their game plan unhindered. This almost led to a point where they could basically take both us and the Bruna player out by milling our graveyards, but fortunately, due to a little bit of luck and a misplay from the Phenax player, the Bruna player was able to take them out and then give us the small opening we needed to take the game. Well, that's it for today's video. If you'd like to see more gameplay videos from various commanders, make sure to check out our playlists on the channel where you'll find all of the gameplay videos for each commander in one neat, convenient place. Until next time, guys.